You are live, it says. Oh, by the way, as well, Raj, I know people can hear us, but I just want to let you know, if on the top right there should be something that says comments, so you'll be able to see the comments that are coming in from the YouTube.
Yeah.
You got that?
Yeah, I can see that.
You can click on that. Good. And we'll get going in a minute. In a second, we'll get going. Good evening and welcome to Raconteurs News. I don't know why, but that never works for me. I did not hear a single thing on that. Didn't hear any of the music. I just had to look at when our guest's mic became live again, so that I knew that when it had finished. So anyway, good evening. Welcome to Raconteurs News. Thank you for allowing us to interrupt your Wednesday night. We've done 3 shows this week. A bit disappointing on the first with No Show Max Egan, and the second one again a little bit disappointed that we didn't get, we only got an hour with Dave Von Kleist, but still thank you to them people for coming on, and we've had an interesting little chit chat. Well, I hope you're enjoying Lockup still. It's beautiful here in Sheffield, and all this 5G and birds dying and all that. We got thousands in our garden, thousands of birds. They are thriving. So there's obviously no 5G around here. Anyway, tonight it's a Wednesday. It's unusual for me to be on a Wednesday, but I've got a guest who got in touch with me after the Mark Devlin show. I think we were a fan of Mark Devlin. And he asked me if he could come on and talk about something. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let him tell us what he wants to talk about, but let me get him on and let me introduce you to Raj Mahay. Good evening, Raj. How are you doing, my friend?
Good evening, Jason. Thanks for having me on your show. I really appreciate that.
Listen, it's not a problem. When I heard your story, when we sat and talked a week ago, I think we only spoke for about an hour. But I think you told me enough in that time that we probably could fill a 3-hour show. We've only got 2 hours tonight, so sorry. I just want to. I want you to start off with your story right from the very beginning. I'll just say good evening to everyone in the chat room. Good evening, Bandit Buster, Lion Chair, Alice George, Maximizer, Super Leads, Owen Lloyd Martin as well. But I really want to get on with Raj, because his story, it's tragic. It's got corruption in it, and it's I'll let him tell you anyway. Raj, tell us what happened. Why are you here? Why are you sat here talking to me tonight?
Well, as you've said, Jason, I did listen to your show with Mark Devlin. I've heard a few of his podcasts. I've seen him on, obviously on YouTube. I just appealed basically just to tell my story. I think my story's got a lot of connotations that equate to an era where policing was very, well, how can I put it? It was not the way it should be done. My story started in March 1989. It was on the 14th of March when my mother was killed by a police officer driving a police patrol car. My mother was actually on a pedestrian crossing at the time of the impact. Subsequent to that, she was thrown 40 yards along the road where she hit a brick wall, and she came to rest on a pavement in a pool of her own blood. And obviously her body was all mangled and twisted and broken. I was alerted by a shopkeeper. This actually, the location of this was in Wolverhampton on the Cannock Road in the West Midlands. I was alerted that my mother was actually involved in a traffic accident. or an incident on the Cannock Road by one of the shopkeepers. The actual pedestrian crossing is basically next to all these shops that are used by many people. She was actually attending one of the shops to order some Indian sweets for our forthcoming family wedding. So this was about between 7:30 and 7:45 in the evening on the March the 14th, as I say. I get a call from one of the shopkeepers saying your mother's in a road traffic incident here. You need to get down to the Cannock Road. At the time, I came from work and I was basically eating my evening meal. And like I say, we got the phone call. I dropped everything. I ran as fast as I could. Took me best part of 4 to 5 minutes to get to the Cannock Road. And when I got virtually on the Cannock Road itself, I saw my mother whole body covered with a blanket, and the only thing that was exposed was her feet. And on seeing that, I collapsed to my knees. As I collapsed to my knees, an officer came towards me and grabbed me by the throat and trying to erect me, trying to put me up, stand me up. And I said to him, look, this is my mother. What are you doing this for? That's my mother. That's not the way to do things. Then somebody from behind me got me on my, put his two hands on either of my shoulders and pulled me up. So I was erect then. Then I tried to approach the body, and there was an officer standing next to the body. And he basically said, there's nothing you can do. She's dead. So that was the compassion and the empathy and sympathy that I was afforded as I'm just trying to approach the body. So
how old were you at that time, Raj?
I was 24 years old. I would have been 25 in May of that year. So I've been fighting this whole thing for more than half of my life. It's 32 years now.
Sorry, a couple of questions.
Sure.
I've got the crossing that your mother was on.
Yes.
Was it a zebra crossing, or was it one of those with lights? You know, the ones
it was one of those with lights where you could press a button, and you could then obviously halt the traffic in either direction, then go forward.
And what was the police car on blues?
This is a bit of conjecture. The police have claimed throughout that the sirens were blaring and the flashing blue lights were displayed. Witnesses had said that this was not the case. Now, in terms of where the pedestrian crossing is, there's an acute bend prior to the crossings, and also the road narrows considerably at that point, or that stretch of the road. So basically what happens is that the car is traveling at tremendous speed. So what you've got to put into the equation here is what they call the Road Traffic Regulation Act of 1974, subsequently amended in 84 under section 87, which basically says that emergency vehicles can override the speed limit if it hinders their progress. So this is applicable to fire brigades, ambulances, and obviously police vehicles, police patrol vehicles. Now, in terms of police vehicles, there's two categories this can be applied with. The first category is in the eventuality of a police car chase where they're pursuing some suspects or some people. And the other eventuality, which is my mother's case, is when they're on an emergency call out. When they're on an emergency call out, they can actually, like I say, override the speed limit. Some eyewitnesses said there was in excess of 70 or even up to 80 miles an hour. Obviously, that can't be verified, but this is what eyewitnesses were saying. So in all intents and purposes, this was a very fast car in a very built-up area where there was a lot of people at that time of the evening, and also there's a lot of traffic at that time of the evening as well. So to leave the, like I say, some witnesses have said that the flashing blue lights were not displayed and the sirens were not actually activated at that point in time. So she pressed the button to cross the road, as she would normally do, because we've lived in that area all my life, basically. I was.
Is it a single carriageway road? Sorry, Raj.
No, single
carriageway. Yeah.
Single carriageway. Yeah. So invariably, what happened was she pressed the button, crossed the road, and the actual shop is literally adjacent to the pedestrian crossing. In fact, if you walked off the pedestrian crossing, you can carry on walking and walk straight into the shop, into the doorway. So it was that the footprint of the pedestrian crossing and the actual shop is pivotal in this case that we're trying to make, or have tried to make over the years. The other thing that was noticeable was that as if hit my mother, she's gone, like I say, along the road. She hit the wing on the passenger side, and she's been hit and thrown 40 yards, as I said, and she hit the brick wall and she came to rest on the pavement. That, honestly, to be fair with you, Jason, shows the tremendous speed. So if eyewitnesses have got the speed wrong, or whatever it may be, the fact that she's thrown 40 yards to her death is in itself an indication of the immense speed that this car was traveling at. And
yeah, well, if it was the other way around and the police were investigating a regular driver who'd killed somebody, they would use that as an indication of how fast the person were going. Like you say, go on. Sorry.
And so to add no, that's fine. You can show as much as you like. The other thing that kind of plays into this story and gives it a bit more deeper meaning, certainly for our family and myself, is the fact that it was dark. It was a March evening. It had been raining. There was some drizzle in the air as well, so the road was wet. So the tire and the friction or the attraction with the tires in the road is going to be less because of that. Because you don't get to see the pedestrian crossing from a distance because you're coming around a slight bend, invariably to take evasive action is very hard to do, because the pedestrian crossing comes straight at you. Then you're straight onto the pedestrian crossing. So even if you're braking, it's still going to have an impact. Either you're going to hit oncoming traffic on the other lane, in the opposite side, or if there's a pedestrian on the pedestrian crossing or any pedestrians in the vicinity, you're going to hit that individual, because you will not be able to bring that car to a decent speed or to a halt even, which would have been ideal. Bring it to a halt to avoid any fatality. And this is the whole essence of this case. They've always used this Road Traffic Regulation Act to say we're entitled to override the speed limit. I understand all that, and I will say from this point, actually, the driver concerned never set out to kill anybody. That goes without saying. The driver never set out to kill my mother. However, the moment you start using that car in a reckless way, you are effectively making that car into a lethal weapon. It becomes a killing machine in essence. So from that point forward, then, Jason, what I would say is then he's kind of right to drive that fast. And what I mean by that is you're not driving, and this is the key to all this, you're not driving to the favorable conditions of the road ahead of you. I understand he's on the way to it was alleged there was a hit and run further along the Cannock Road, which he was obviously traveling towards. But I can sum this up in one way, and the local MP of that era was Maureen Hicks, MP for the Conservative Party. And in the local press in this part of the neck of the woods is the Express and Star. That's the most popular newspaper. And she said in the paper that no emergency is so serious to justify the loss of life. So what I mean by that is that if you're driving towards an incident in order to render support and help for whoever's ahead of you, it doesn't make any sense if you're traveling at tremendous speed and killing somebody beforehand. What are you trying to achieve by that? You still have to drive to the conditions of the road ahead of you. Due diligence, due care and attention to the road. So as I've said, the conditions, the lighting, it was dark. The fact that, like I said, there was the roads were wet. So invariably, there's a lot of onus upon the driver to be totally and utterly responsible, take the risk assessment, and also be vigilant about his surroundings. So the upshot of this is my mother was the sixth person to be killed by a police vehicle in the UK. There was 3 young footballers who were killed in London. There was there was a police car chasing somebody else, and the car they were chasing hit these 3 footballers in a car, and they killed them. There was another individual also in London who was killed in the same kind of way. Somebody was chasing somebody and their car hit his car and he died. And there was a chap in Bristol, Brian Woodcocks, who was hit again in similar circumstances. My mother was the only pedestrian in this sequence, in this fatality sequence. So what they had to do then was quash any public outcry because there was too many people being killed in these circumstances. There was a lady in Coventry who was killed 3 weeks prior in the West Midlands Police Force area, also in a police vehicle incident. So what they've done basically is justified their actions. And the police have always maintained, and this is another critical part of this case, they've always maintained that she was in the vicinity of the pedestrian crossing, meaning she was not on the pedestrian crossing at the time of the impact. But we know, because my mother always used a pedestrian crossing, we also know from an independent witness who came on the TV news on the following evening, and she basically said that my mother was on the crossing at the point of impact. And when the reporter asked her again to clarify, she repeated my mother was on the pedestrian crossing at the point of impact. So all these factors and all these things point to what we've always maintained as a family. Certainly I have, that it was a police cover-up. And, you know, I don't say this lightly because obviously there's connotations to what I'm saying, but I do say it because that's my experience. And
well, I want to get back, Raj. I mean, we're getting ahead of ourselves. I want to, from the time you mentioned at the time of the incident, when you arrived at the scene, your mother's body was covered,
yes,
with just the feet, and then a policeman proceeded to grab you by the throat. I mean, what was the justification for that at that point?
I to this day would not be able to tell you. How I've categorized that is that I'm trying to reconcile my mother's body covered by a blanket. Okay. I'm trying to reconcile this. As I said, I by seeing that, I collapsed to my knees. So I'm trying to reconcile all this and what's unfolding around me. And I'm also given a torrent of racial abuse. I've been called a packy bastard, a black bastard. I've been called, I was told to get in the fucking car. These are the things that they said to me because they were trying to get me out of the crime scene as quick as they could. So as I've got towards my mother's body, as I said, the officer next to my mother's body said that, you know, there's nothing you can do. She's dead. I walked backwards. As I walked backwards, other members of my family are coming onto the scene, the crime scene. And it was my wife, my daughter, and also my sister. The three of those arrived about 5 minutes after I did. They were ushered very, very vigorously, manhandled and put into cars, and they were driven away from the crime scene. So as I'm retreating from my mother's body, I'm looking in the corner of my eye. I can see the pedestrian crossing being defaced. So what I mean by that is the crash debris and my mother's personal effects were being kicked away from the pedestrian crossing to give the distinct impression that the impact had not happened on the pedestrian crossing. As
so
I say,
it wasn't treated like a crime scene, like it would a normal accident. You would think these days. There's a fatality involved. Usually, you know, there's all sorts of people got to get involved.
Well, it was like I say, it was a Tuesday evening, and traffic was halted then on both sides of the Cannock Road. Like I say, the crime scene was being defaced. What should normally happen is they should cordon off the area, keep the area sterile. So when the forensics people and all the other road traffic collision investigators come onto the crime scene, they can do their critique of that particular area and obviously put everything into the report. But when they were kicking stuff away from the pedestrian crossing, and as I said, one of my mother's shoes was kicked towards me by a police officer attending the crime scene, and I've kept that to this day. So I know for a fact that things were defaced to the extent that they would not know where the impact officially occurred. Now, it's not ironic, but it's actual fact that when the inquest hearing happened, the analyst who was in the witness box said he cannot say without certainty, with any certainty, where the impact happened, because it was questionable how the debris was dispersed on the road. In other words, he's agreeing to the fact that the debris was unusually spread across the road. So that would suggest that there was some element of deliberate defacing of the crime scene. Like I say, to give the impression the impact did not happen on the pedestrian crossing, as the eyewitnesses have said. There was 2 actual eyewitnesses have said that, and ironically, or whatever you want to look at it, they were not actually summoned to appear at the inquest hearing. So as I retreated from my mother's body, and I can see in the corner of my eye the crime scene being defaced and things being shifted away from the pedestrian crossing. Other members of the family are coming onto the scene and the crime scene. They've been taken into cars and out of the crime scene. So I'm still there, and the officers keep saying to me, "Get into the fucking car, you're packing, what are you standing here? Get in the car." They're using all these insults at me, and I'm, like I said, I'm trying to work out what's going on around me. So I try a second attempt to go towards the body, and the same officer standing over the body saying, "It's not a pretty sight." So that was a comment he made. Again, that was the compassion I was afforded.
Yeah.
Then the last person to arrive onto the crime scene was my father, because obviously he couldn't get there because of anybody else. As soon as he arrived on the scene, he was grabbed around the throat, by his around the neck, in a lock, in an arm lock. So I explained to the officer, "Look, that's the husband of the deceased. That's my dad, and that's my mother. What are you doing this for?" And that, if I say one thing about this case for the last 32 years, that was the ultimate point where everything changed, because my father said, "You're not going to win against these people, because in the West Midlands Police Force area, there's a lot of issues around how they do the policing, and the ethnic minorities, how they approach people. So, to all intents and purposes, these people were very, very good at what they did, and the reason they did this, Jason, was because they had impunity. They knew what they did. They had their backs covered by their senior officers." So
it's not just the senior officers though that are covering the backs, is it? I mean, you've got the coroner and various other people also covering the police officer, the police's back. The police. I mean, like you said, you're not blaming the driver. You're not saying that he went out to do this.
Yeah, I'd say that without any hesitation.
But it was clearly, if what you're telling us is true, and I've got no reason to disbelieve you at all, but it was driving dangerously, and causing death by dangerous driving is there's murder, manslaughter, and causing death by dangerous driving. That's the 3 types of homicide. So we're talking about a homicide here. So we're talking about something really, really, and it seems that the cover-up started at the scene where they've been. I can imagine them sweeping up the debris.
Yes.
And back in that time as well, in 1989, it was a different world, and people would talk to people like you in the manner that you're talking about.
I can add a bit more to that, actually. In 1989, the year of my mother's death, in that year, the Serious Crime Squad that operated out of Birmingham was disbanded by Chief Constable Jeffrey Deere. The reason behind that was there was too many complaints, there was too many miscarriages of justice, and I speak about the 2 main ones of that era, which was the Birmingham 6, who were imprisoned, and also the Bridgewater 4, who were imprisoned. Carl Bridgewater was actually a paper boy. I think he was 13 or 14 years old. He was killed in a secluded farmhouse in Stourbridge, which is near Dudley. So in essence, he was killed, and 4 people were then subsequently tried, and they were imprisoned for a considerable amount of time. In fact, one of them, I think, died in prison. Never up until the point the convictions was quashed. I think he died in prison. So what I'm saying is, in terms of history and capturing that era of policing in the West Midlands Police Force area, that gives you an indication of what you're up against. Now, okay, they may have disbanded the Serious Crime Squad in 1989. But what you got to understand here, Jason, there's an element of culture.
Yeah.
Policing culture, it doesn't die immediately. It's not like a light switch where you can just turn on and off and say, there you go.
It's not even dead now.
It's
that
no,
culture
yeah,
you're
yeah.
talking about isn't even dead now. It's still to this day. They think that they are fucking above the law. And like a lot of people have said, this is the same year as Hillsborough, and it was West Midlands were asked to investigate South Yorkshire Police handling of Hillsborough. So, you know, you've got corruption, investigating corrupt officers. It's just completely ridiculous.
One of the officers assigned to my mother's case, I was asked to meet him on one of the evenings at the local Wentzville police station. So I went there, and we had a very quick chat, to be fair. And the gist of the chat was that he said that he was no longer be on my mother's case. And I asked him why. He said, well, basically, he's going up to Hillsborough, or the Hillsborough investigation, as part of the West Midlands Police Force, who were going to investigate the South Yorkshire Police Force with regards to the Hillsborough disaster. And my mother was killed, as I say, in March. Hillsborough happened in April. The semi-final of the FA Cup, Nottingham Forest against Liverpool, happened in April. And he was part of that team who went up to Hillsborough or South Yorkshire to investigate their conduct in the disaster that's forever. I mean, it took 24 years for Hillsborough families to get some sort of solace or justice, if you want to call it that, in terms of accountability for the Hillsborough disaster. I mean, obviously, there's still things going on now as we speak, but 96 people perished. And to be fair, you know, justice is something you have to fight for.
I don't think justice. I think they've just had recognition that it wasn't fans' fault. I think the justice that they want and they crave, I think time is going to be taking that away from them, from the Hillsborough families, just as probably your fight for justice.
Yeah. I would elaborate further on that. In 2008, we was trying to get a TV report done on the local central news in the Midlands, and we was trying to trace one of the eyewitnesses, and she's actually on the TV news from that day. We was trying to trace this lady, and we couldn't trace her. There's two elements, I think, at play here. The first thing is that time is not always on your side, because people either lose their memory or they forget things in the exact order they happened. And you know, in a court of law, it has to be precise and specific, because obviously you're going to portion blame on somebody. And the other thing is that you know, either people pass on, or they're not available to, they're not been able to be traced or contacted, which kind of dampens one's you know, opportunity to pursue the case in a more sort of robust way. But I'm always been adamant across the 32 years that my mother was unlawfully killed, allegedly. I wasn't there when it happened. I'm only going by what I'm aware of and what eyewitnesses told me at the time. One of the eyewitnesses who was actually who said my mother was exactly on the crossings when she was killed. When she was killed, I managed to approach her in the coming days after the death, and she promised me she would give me a statement, a witness account of what she saw on that day. And she was inferring to the fact that I was abused racially, where my mother's impact occurred. And to me, that was like gold dust. That's what all needed. We had given the police, or the Police Complaints Authority, as it was in those days, the names of potential witnesses. So people were coming to the house. You could remember after the death, people were coming, showing their condolences and so forth and so forth. So people were giving their aspects to what had happened and what they heard. So these are people in the Cannock Road area, in the Park Village area. So when the police was contacting us, they were saying, give us any witness names. We need to interview these witnesses. We're going to try and get justice for your mother, and all these things that they come out with. So we was giving them names. And to all intents and purposes, to be honest with you, Jason, I think there was eliminating these people. How can a woman who's given her sort of word to me that she would help me with a statement, and she said your mother was on the crossings when it happened, how can she just suddenly vanish into thin air?
Gone completely. You found out where she is.
I mean, we gave her the name. Like I said, she appeared on the news anyway, on the TV news. That's how we got to know about her. So when I approached her on the following evening, I said to her, look, would you be prepared to give me a statement? And she said, yes, I would. She said, I'm shocked of what I saw, and I'm shocked the way the police are portraying your mother as some kind of a stunt woman who had no regard for her own well-being and purposely ran in front of the car, in effect committing suicide, if you will. So at the crime scene, I've seen all these things. Then 2 officers came towards me. They said, you need to get away from here. So they got their arms around my arm and they're pulling me. Bear in mind, I got the shoe in my hand as well. So they put me in a car, in a police patrol car, to take me away from the crime scene. That car never started. So they took me out of that car and they put me in another police car. Then they said, is there any members of your family that haven't arrived to the crime scene? And I said, well, there's my younger brother. I don't know where he is at the moment. I did have a clue. I thought he may be at some youth club. So I asked the police officer to drive me there, which wasn't very far, to be honest. It was about 2 minutes away. We went to the youth club and the youth club was closed. So from that point, they drove me to the Royal Hospital, which used to be the main hospital in Wolverhampton in that era. And as I got into the hospital, I just got out the car and just ran into the hospital, and I saw the rest of my family members there. And just as I walked in, literally, the duty doctor came to the family, and he said, "I'm sorry to say, but your mother is now, she's no longer." Yes, she's deceased. Yeah, so she's pronounced deceased officially in that capacity. So we went home from the hospital.
As you're concerned, she was dead at the scene.
Yeah, she was. Yeah, this kind of official talk they have, don't they? They're officially deceased, and the official doctor is telling you that. Hasten to add, the ambulance took 40 minutes to arrive to the scene. As I've also said previously, the road traffic collision investigators also took 40 minutes to arrive to the scene. So there was ample opportunity to face the actual crime scene to however they wanted to do. Bear in mind, I'd left the scene from that point forward because I went straight, like I said, looking for my brother first. Then we went to the hospital. So when we came back that evening, back home, there was that many people at the house who could not believe it. People were coming from everywhere. So we're talking about 10 o'clock in the evening, 10:30 in the evening now. Then when everybody had gone, so you're talking about 2 o'clock in the morning now. My father said, because obviously the way he was treated at the scene, and I also shared my experience on the scene, how I was racially assaulted, verbally, manhandled. He said to me, the best thing we can do is just back off. But we did not know at that time what the outcome of the post-mortem examination was. Now, this is another part of this case that's integral and critical, in the sense that the post...
Back to the scene, sorry, just one more question about the scene, that's all.
Yeah, sure.
Any idea what happened to the driver? Where did he go?
The driver was driven immediately, because he was obviously in shock, immediately to the actual hospital, I believe, for some treatment.
Right. Okay. Carry on. So loads of aspects of this. Yeah, go on. Carry on.
So as myself and my father, we're exchanging our reflections on that evening, and my father said, "Look, don't bother, because you've seen the way they've handled you. You see the way they've racially abused you, and you've seen the way they treated him as well." He said, are we going to go any further? There may be reprisals. They may try and, trying to fit us up with something or trying to. And to be fair, that was not uncommon in the era. There would be some reprisal of sorts if we spoke up with some vigor against the police brutality, and also the fact that my mother was on the pedestrian crossing. We've always assumed it's an unlawful killing, because that was one of the verdicts that could have been delivered at the inquest hearing. So the next day, all the family's distraught. All the family are in bits. I'm the only one. I'm 24 years old. I'm the only one who's trying to keep everything together. So the next day, one of my tasks was to actually identify my mother's body at the mortuary. So I met somebody at the coroner's office, and the sergeant took me down to Wensfield Police Station. And there's two elements to the police station. You got a mortuary on the one side, which is literally on a car park. Then you got the main police station block, as it were. So I get taken to the mortuary, and obviously it was my mother. Her face was all battered, ears were hanging off, and there's a massive hole in the forehead, all the things that you would associate with a high-speed collision with a vehicle. So I'm trying to get my head around that. Bear in mind, I'm still reliving what happened the night before. So they said, "Is that your mother?" I said, "Yeah, that's my mother." They said, "Okay." Then they take me across a car park to the main police station. So as I'm going across the car park, I recognize one of the police officers from the night before. He's sitting in his car, and he's looking at me, and he's revving his car and smiling at me. Now, wow. How what is all that about? So I'm trying to get my head around what I've seen with my mother's face and what's left of her.
You've just identified your mum, who's in a complete and utter mess because she's been hit by a police car that's and been thrown 40 yards, killed up against the wall and killed. And the police officer who recognised you, as I assume,
I recognised him. Yeah, I recognised him as well.
He recognised you. Starts revving his car as you come out. I mean,
and he's saying something underneath his breath, and he's smiling. Anyway, I'm trying to put that out of my mind. I get taken into the police station and into an interview room. So I'm sitting there. It looked like it was about 8 to 10 minutes I was sitting in there. So these two officers walk into the room. They introduce themselves. I've never seen these people before, or officers before. They introduce themselves and they say, "We're the Police Complaints Authority. As a default position, because your mother's been hit by a police car and killed by a police officer, we have to investigate the actual, the death under the Police and Criminal Evidence Act." So as they're talking, one of them is talking all the time. The other one's very, very quiet, just nodding and shaking his head and so forth. But the one who's doing all the talking, he basically said, "It's a straightforward case. Your mother's at fault." So this is less than 24 hours after the death. They've already made their mind up.
They've
said that she ran into the car. It would appear they're trying to allude to the fact she's suicidal, or she was totally unaware of her surroundings. Okay, so he said to me, "This is going to be a formality. This will be more or less a case of getting it tied up, and that's it." And I said, "Well, I don't agree with that." I said, "How can you make that decision so quickly?" So he said to me, he started being a bit aggressive. He started being a bit animated, and his facial expressions changed as well. And he said, "Look, you need to back off, or there will be consequences." And he said, "You better go home, start comforting your family." And did I want to see my daughter grow up? My daughter was 2.5 years old at the time. He said, "Do you want to see your daughter?" Yeah. So did you want to see your daughter grow up? I'm shaking my head. So I bowed my head. I'm started shaking my head. Then the sergeant from the coroner's office who brought me to the mortuary in the beginning, he came into the room and said, "Do you want to go home now?" I said, "Yes, I do." So he drove me back home. As we're going home, he's saying to me, "Under no circumstances whatsoever speak to any members of the media." So that's the written press, TV and radio. So that was a point, Jason, that my mind was made up that this is a cover-up. The penny had dropped big time. So he's repeated it twice now. He said, "Don't speak to any members of the media." So I got to the house. It's parked outside the house on the opposite side of the road. I get out the car. As I'm getting out the car, BBC and ITV are there, the TV crews.
Right.
So they approached me and they said, "Would you like to go on camera and say something?" I said, "Of course I would. I'd like to appeal to witnesses. I want witnesses to come forward." Because up to that point now, I'm realizing that this now is becoming not just an accident investigation or whatever you want to call it. This is becoming a cover-up. So my immediate thought was to get more witnesses who would concur that the story is that my mother was on the pedestrian crossing. And hopefully someone would see them defacing the crime scene as well. So as I'm going on, I've done this interview. I did 2 interviews, one with the BBC and ITV. One of them, unfortunately, never got transmitted. But all I said on the one that was transmitted was, "Look, I don't know why the police car was coming at that speed at that particular time in the evening."
Is that on YouTube?
Yeah, it's on the YouTube video. It's one of the main one. You'll see me on there.
Blah blah. Campaigning for justice. 10 Downing Street hangover.
I mean, you can show the actual. It's the one. I think it's campaigning for justice. It's the one with my mother's face at the front. You might see the picture if that's on there.
Oh right, okay.
Yeah, it's only about 10 minutes, 10-13 minutes, if that.
It's 15 minutes and 26 seconds.
That's the one. That's the one I'm on about. But that basically has got the 2 reports from the TV. As I said, you'll see me on one of those. And the first part is just goes into a bit of the background to the case and the campaign that we're trying to obviously carry out. So as I've come out the car, I've given the interviews, and on the evening, these TV broadcasts are being broadcasted. So on one of those, the superintendent from the West Midlands Police comes onto the TV, and he refers to my mother as the proverbial dog. So he's referring to my mother as a dog. So if you want to, if anybody wants a history lesson of how policing was done in that era, that's one typical example of that. So there's no, we're sorry that my mother.
He's talking as if he's talking in the same way that he would talk about a police officer running over a dog. Is that
absolutely, absolutely? That's the best definition. I mean, he's saying my mother darted like the old proverbial dog in front of the car. So basically, he's saying that the police officer is devoid of any responsibility, and this is how brutal it was in those days. So they've never, ever officially apologized for that remark. So if you can imagine a family, Jason, sitting down and watching the news, obviously we videotaped it because in those days you had VHS. You videotaped this, and to see over and over again, because when I first heard it and seen the broadcast, I could not believe it. Bear in mind, this is like the second day now. This is the day after. So it's like 24 hours because the evening news came about 6:30, 7 o'clock. This is like 24 hours after the death. So we're trying to digest the death. We got, like I say, people still coming in and out the house, paying their condolences and so forth. Yeah. When we're watching the news, then to see the superintendent make that comment in such derogatory ways, that forever has been etched on our memory, and I can't ever see the day when that will ever go away. I think I'll take that to the grave.
How did the community react to that? Because you're from a Muslim community. You were growing up. I'm assuming, and kick me ass if if I'm assuming wrong. But I'm assuming you're from like a close network of people. You've got family, and all close, and sure. There's a lot of people. How did the community as a whole react to that?
I mean, a lot of, as I said earlier, in those days you had video recorders, so people doing VHS recordings on a tape. A lot of other people have done the same, other family relatives and what have you, and neighbours and people in the area and even they were saying that this is beyond disbelief, really. There's no apology being made, but they're willing to go on the offensive and use derogatory terms when explaining my mother's conduct when crossing the road.
Right. So you're 24 hours in from your mother's death, right?
But now, even less than that, Jason, because the interview with the superintendent was done on the morning when I was actually at the identifying my mother's body. That's when they interviewed this superintendent from the West Midlands Police. So it was on the morning, because when you see the actual footage, you can see it's daybreak and everything. And so what I'm getting at is that they had formalized a narrative. The narrative is the most important thing in all this. Because
I just wanted to quickly do a recap, just for anybody that might have joined us a little bit late. It's I know it's funny for us to be on a Wednesday, but I thought this was an important something that was important to do, and because I'd already got Monday and Tuesday booked up, I thought I'd do this Wednesday. So I've got Raj Mahay, and Raj is campaigning for justice for his mother, who was killed by a police car in 1989 on a pedestrian crossing. Basically what we've gone from is, from 24 hours, within 24 hours of your mother being killed in this accident, not only has she been referred to as the proverbial dog on television, for fuck's sake. I mean, if somebody had said that in private, it would have been. But he's actually said it on television, and also, the case has been already been. The investigation's already been completed as far as they're concerned. It was definitely your mother's fault. And this is all within 24 hours. I mean, I know this story goes like loads and loads more, but just that small 24-hour period, there is enough there to for anybody to understand the culture of policing at that time. And I don't think has changed very much at all.
Well, I did an interview, as you're well aware of, with Press TV to mark 31 years of my mother's death, the anniversary. And the reporter asked me, he said, has things changed in the 3 decades since your mother's been killed? Do you think the police are more transparent? The state in its entirety is more transparent? I said, I can't comment on individual cases, obviously. I can only refer to my own case because I'm with it 24/7. My better judgment and my determination tells me it's not much of a change. It's more covert. And I think if police just be honest, like any other civilian would have to be, if he was under the criminal justice system, you'd be tried and in the court of law and what have you. Like I said earlier, when you're acting with impunity, when you know that you are going to be given that luxury of being excused from any, bad behaviors, whether it be a verbal attack, physical attack, or defacing a crime scene, whatever it may be, then obviously these people acted accordingly. Because if I'm working for somebody, Jason, and somebody says to me, don't do this because it's a violation of the conduct code or the standards of behavior. Otherwise, if you do that, then you are going to be up for some kind of disciplinary action, which potentially could have you sacked. Yeah. So I know what the consequences are. I know how to behave in the workplace. Now, if you then give an immunity saying, like, well, you do that, you can get away with it because we'll cover you. This is how it appears to us. This is how our recollections tell us. Obviously, over the years, we've tried to remember as much as we can. As I said earlier about witnesses, the longer the time elapses, the greater the maintaining or remembering things becomes more convoluted and more complex. So, and you're right in what you've just said. The first 24 hours of any crime is the most important because everybody's recollections are absolutely fresh. The evidence is still fresh as well. And I say definitely the first 48 hours, if not the first 24 hours, is the most critical part of any case, because all the things are readily available. So why would somebody come on TV news and say in no uncertain terms that my mother was on the pedestrian crossing at the point of impact? We haven't put her in front of the TV screens under duress. She's done it voluntarily. We didn't even know this person until we saw her on the television. And that's the person I approached. And I said, would you be prepared to give it? And she said, yes. Then subsequently, the coming days, she just vanished. So, this is the kind of people, whether she was frightened off by the police when they interviewed her, or there was some kind of other, I don't know. Rumors were rife that there's something gone on toward here, which would jeopardize her.
I mean, if it gets, I know this don't sound like it can, folks, but honestly, this gets worse as well. As we sort of, as you move on, so you look right. We're in the chronology. The first 24 hours, we've gone through what you did then. I mean, what sort were you given a family liaison officer?
Nothing.
Any support by the police at all?
Nothing at all. We were, like I say, I don't know if there was no suggestion of bereavement counselling or counselling of any, like we have today in this modern day. We have, obviously mental health, well-being, and duty of care towards individuals. I don't think that was as pronounced in that era as it is today. Like I say, the police have never apologised for any aspect of this case. As I said about the proverbial dog remark, or the fact that they killed my mother. Now, on the 16th, so the death was on the 14th. I went to identify the body on the 15th. Now, on the 16th, it was the post-mortem examination. So the examination was held up next to the mortuary where I identified the body the day before. So the Home Office pathologist was obviously doing the post-mortem examination. And his conclusions were that my mother was a chronic alcoholic who consumed alcohol to the extent her liver was cirrhosis-ridden. Now, I can assure you, I was 24 years old at the time. I lived with my parents for all that time. My mother never, ever touched alcohol in her life. She took great pride. She's a Punjabi woman. She took great pride in looking after her health and her well-being. So when I rang the coroner's office, because I knew the post-mortem was going to happen in the morning, I rang the coroner's office, and he just told me the actual body itself, in terms of its damage and what have you, is consistent with a high-speed collision with a car. So that was obvious. But they never told me anything about the cirrhosis of the liver. You see. Right. So what happened was
there's something else in it. There's another reason why she might have darted out into the road.
Well, I'm going to come on to that. That's what I'm going to come on, and that'll be sort of explanatory in a bit. So he's never told me anything about cirrhosis of the liver. What happened, Jason, was that they do like a biopsy, like of the liver itself. But he had suggested on the post-mortem examination report there was some fatty like stuff around the liver, and which could suggest cirrhosis of the liver, right? So he sent a little piece of my mother's liver for the histology examination or report, and they've come back and they said, yeah, it could be. Here's the key: it could be cirrhosis of the liver attributable to alcohol abuse in the years beforehand. So my take on that is very simple. Where was she drinking? Why was she drinking? What are the symptoms of cirrhosis of the liver? There's so many specific symptoms of cirrhosis of the liver. One is you're drinking more than an average person would drink, because obviously your body is now kind of immune to small amounts of alcohol, so you need more. to get the kick out of it. 2, where was she getting the money for this alcohol? And 3, most importantly, where was she drinking? Where was she having these hangovers and having these, drunken episodes?
You can tell when someone drinks a lot.
Exactly.
I've had my problems with drink in the past, and my missus knows all the signs and will know whenever, if because sometimes I'm going to go too far. I'll drink too much for days. There's no way that you can hide that. And my liver, this is the thing about it is because of my condition, I have my bloods and things taken a lot, and my liver is in good tip-top condition apparently. So for your mother, she must have been for that to be down to attributable to alcohol intake. Then she must have. There's no way she could have hidden that at all.
Yeah, and there are specific symptoms of cirrhosis of the liver. Your liver will swell, and it will contract as well. It will go small. You can have various symptoms on the outside of your body, like jaundice in your eyes. Yellow. Your eyes go yellow. You can have ammonia in the brain, which confuses you, which can affect your memory. You can have varicose veins on your legs. You could be immune to, losing weight.
You'd be able to smell it, Raj.
Yeah. Basically, without going into all the medical, and I'll come on to the medical issue in a bit later on. But apart from going into the medical scenario of cirrhosis of the liver, I can say emphatically that without any hesitation, as I say, for 24 years, I lived with my parents. One half of my parent was my mother. I've never, ever seen her drink alcohol. The next thing I'm going to say, it can be a bit controversial, but it is something that is linked to what I'm about the cirrhosis of the liver. My mother came to this country in the early 60s. Originally, the males from the subcontinent came to this country, and the idea was to make some money, then eventually go back home, buy some land, then you'd be set up for life. But eventually the women came over, the wives came over. Now, one of the first generations to come over to the country, into the UK from the subcontinent, was my mother and other of her contemporaries. Now, those women of that era were never going to drink alcohol. They never drank alcohol.
No.
I will concede readily with you, Jason, that men did. I'm not going to lie to you about that, because they did. But women never, ever.
Of that era.
Of that era and of that ilk. You see, coming from the Punjab, they're very, very strict things that women do. Women would not ever, ever drink alcohol. And if you do get somebody drinking alcohol, it's going to be a rarity. So what I'm saying is, not only have they insulted my mother's memory by saying she's an alcoholic who had no understanding of her bearings when she was on the road. So invariably, what they're saying is that her ability to cross the road safely was greatly impaired because of her alcohol tendencies. So that's what they're basically saying. And I'll come on to that in a bit when we get to the inquest hearing. Okay. So women of that era never, ever drank alcohol. So it's a slur. Like I said, they killed her twice. Once physically, in the physical sense. And secondly, in the defamation of character, which was self-evident because they've said, she's an alcoholic in essence. Now, so they've done the post-mortem and they haven't revealed to us the fact that she's got cirrhosis of the liver. So the solicitor who's acting on our behalf, so this is just before the actual inquest hearing, they've decided, the Police Complaints Authority has decided not to disclose any documents. So there was 23 witness statements apparently, and there was 7 other documents in the file, in the dossier, as far as my mother's case was concerned, what the PCA, the Police Complaints Authority, had collated. So, so they never shared that with the solicitor. Okay, so what they used.
Never disclosed. Sorry, so they never disclosed it to your solicitor. Rather, so you're talking about rules of disclosure rather than they did disclose it to. They disclose it to the coroner's court?
Yeah, well, that came after. We wasn't aware of that. So what happened prior? We're trying to prepare for the inquest hearing. So they opened the inquest. then they obviously recess or they have an adjournment until the inquest hearing itself, so they can carry on with the investigation. Basically, the solicitor's asking the Police Complaints Authority, can you disclose anything to us? Can you tell us, even, you know, whatever it may be? So they've enacted the Police and Complaints Evidence Act. So basically what they're saying is they're using the doctrine of public interest and immunity, the PII they call it. So
Right.
that means if they disclose anything, that may be disadvantageous to the investigation or to one party or the other, depending on what's disclosed. Now, my take on all this is, Jason, is that if you've got nothing to hide and you've continuously said that my mother was in the vicinity of the pedestrian crossing at the point of impact, and you have witness statements supporting that, why wouldn't you want to disclose that information? At the end of the day, you're the police. You're investigating the police to the PCA. And it's the old adage, Jason, and, you know, I have to say this because it's the only way I can say it. When you get police investigating police, there's only going to be one outcome. So they tried every trick in the book to make their way towards that inquest hearing without us knowing anything. So my mother died in March. The inquest hearing was in November. So in November, we arrive at the inquest hearing not knowing anything. Who were the witness? Who's been interviewed? Whatever. What are the outcomes of the traffic collision investigating team? Whatever. We didn't know anything.
Disclosed nothing.
We had nothing. We had nothing at all.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So you're going into a legal. You're going into what is essentially a court.
Yes. With jurors. Remember, we got a jury in this inquest hearing.
Right. Okay. Right. Yeah. So we've got a jury inquest.
Yeah.
And you have no disclosure from the police or the PPE or whoever or the coroner or anybody.
Nothing at all, as far as we're concerned. So so they've aligned a barrister. The solicitors have aligned a barrister for the day, for the inquest hearing. So obviously they start off the proceedings, and the coroner will then guide the jury, tell them what's going to happen, what are the basic stages of the inquest hearing, and so forth. So I was the first witness. When I say witness, all I did was read out my witness statement saying who my mother was, because I identified the body, as I said earlier, and where she lived and so forth, and what her status was at the time. I basically said she had no health conditions. So when the police, prior to the actual inquest, the police are asking us to give us witness statements, give us names of people who are witnesses and so forth. I've also declared in a statement to the Police Complaints Authority, that is, that they have our consent to consult the GP records. They purposely never went to the GP because this thing about cirrhosis would have been highlighted then, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Because the GP is treating my mother. Let's say she had cirrhosis. He would have then said, "Yeah, here's the file. You can see quite clearly that over the years I've been treating her for her liver complaint, cirrhosis." So when we went into the actual inquest, they never consulted the GP records. So we're at the inquest now. As I say, my statement's been read out in the courtroom. Then the first person to take the witness box was the Home Office pathologist. So his second sentence was, the deceased was an alcoholic. She had cirrhosis of the liver attributable to alcohol abuse. So this is the second or third sentence he's speaking. So you got the 10 jurors looking at this. So what you have in essence, Jason, is subliminal messaging to give the impression to the jurors her ability to cross the road, as I say, is greatly impaired.
Yeah.
Because she's obviously has these alcoholic tendencies. So this is where from that point forward, we lost it. We were never going to get anywhere. So there was witness who were called into the witness box to obviously give their account of what had happened. The first person was a student, allegedly. She got confused which side of the road she was on, or which side the traffic was coming. So that was her kind of introduction. The next two public eyewitnesses were two sisters who were in the same car. So they got two people who sit in the same car and the sisters. Okay. Then the next person is the shopkeeper, where my mother was going to make that order for the Indian sweets for the forthcoming family wedding. So they bring him in, and all he remember is my mother being hit, and he's running out the shop towards my mother, where she's now come to a stop on the pavement. And here's the thing, Jason. The key witness that we put forward was his sister-in-law, who was in the shop at the time when my mother was hit. And she said in 2 newspaper articles that my mother was like on the pedestrian crossing because their shop window was showered with debris or glass from the impact. And that can only happen if she was on the pedestrian crossing. Because as I say, as you walk off the pedestrian crossing, you walk straight into the shop.
Right.
Because they claim she was a bit behind the shop and running diagonally across the road, which is what the police are saying. And what the patrol car driver said, and also the passenger, the police officer passenger. Their statements were identical to the extent that the vocabulary was identical, the sentences, the words were identical. Now, if me or you were in a car and we had caused a fatality, both of us would have been separated and be asked to give a statement.
Yeah.
These people get together and they collude, and the statements are more or less the same. That's what I'm on about, the impunity. Using words like that, very big words to use against a police force, you know. But I have my time on this case, certainly in the last 15 years, where I've ramped it up a bit more. My take on all this is that if they gave us a fair investigation in this era now, I can assure you it will be a different outcome. Because when you get collusion, you get cover-ups, you get alleged. This is all alleged, obviously. I've got no evidence to suggest otherwise, but that's just my take on it. It's all alleged allegations. You are going to be obviously given that free rein to do what you want, really, which has no consequence apart from detrimental consequences to the deceased and the deceased family that's been left behind. So this is all alleged, you see. That's what I'm saying, because this is what my experience tells me. So we've had the inquest hearing, and we've obviously got a verdict of accidental death. So there could have been 3 potential verdicts: accidental death, as I say, which was what they delivered, unlawful killing, or an open verdict. So that could have been the 3 potential verdicts they could have given.
Right. Okay. And they were instructed by the judge that those 3.
Yeah. The coroner who has to do, like in a normal court, you'd have the judge directing the jury.
Yeah.
In the coroner's court, you obviously have the coroner who directs the jury, and he was obviously drawn on his experience and expertise. So he's basically setting his summing up before the actual jurors then retire to do their deliberations. He said, and I said this at the beginning of our conversation today, it's the Road Traffic Regulation Act of 1974, subsequently updated in 84, Section 87, which allows emergency vehicles to override the speed limit if it hinders their progress. So he's citing that to the jury. So the jury go away, and here's the thing, Jason. They take 7 minutes. 7 minutes before they return a verdict of accidental death.
7 minutes.
7 minutes. 7 minutes. Yeah, 7 minutes. I mean, it's unbelievable. Like I say, if we had somebody in this day and age re-looking at everything. So what happened then was we went home from that inquest hearing totally and utterly besides ourselves, because we think we've been, well, there's no justice, as it were. So,
well, yeah, I mean what you've been clinging to, you've up until that point, you've not been able to hear or see. There's nothing been official that's been in front of you, and then you see that officialdom is just as corrupt as the 12 months that you've, the months that you've had leading up, where the police were treating you like crap. We've just been treated like crap again and chucked out, and the jury. That's the thing that really surprises me. I mean, surely the judge would say you can't have gone over all the evidence in 7 minutes, and come to a verdict.
Yeah, and I mean, we're saying the era that we're talking about is the late 80s. Like I say, we've obviously spoken about Hillsborough to some degree. The policing in the West Midlands Police Force certainly would suggest that, things of this ilk can happen. I'm under no illusions that if we would have been given a fair trial, a fair investigation, and our solicitor was fully abreast of all the witness statements or any other information pertaining to this investigation, then we would have had a better chance of doing something. So when we say allegedly covered up, we're also citing the Home Office pathologist. For I feel my mother's liver was switched at the post-mortem. I feel he was switched. Now, the irony of all this is, Jason, is that in Punjabi culture, once the body was released back to the family, we have cremations. So that opportunity to do a second post-mortem, to exhume a body, which isn't there, obviously, because it's cremated, and also a liver, we can't because it's been cremated. We can only go by the official documented sort of records, as it were. So my father said to me after the inquest, under no circumstances, try and challenge this, because they've called your mother an alcoholic in an official forum. It's disgusting. So
do you think your dad were probably giving you some advice that based upon his previous dealings, not with police, but just with authority in general, since he'd been in this country?
Yeah. I mean, look, there was obviously in that era. I remember growing up. I was born in '64 in Wolverhampton. As I said, my mother was one of the first women to come in the early '60s. I was born in '64, and I grew up. I went to school. I went to a Holy Trinity school, and I enjoyed every minute of it because that was my life. I had the best of the Punjabi culture at home, and I had the best of the Western culture outside the house, and I enjoyed every element of it. And but we always was aware of the racism. I'm a football fan, and I know you got an Argentinian top on, but I'm a football fan, right? And I could never go to the Molineux, which is my local Wolverhampton Wanderers stadium, in that era, because obviously there was a hooligan element there. We know that the far right, like Compact 18 and things like that,
were racist. People were just were more racist, more openly racist. I remember
it was a different culture.
Funny we talked. No, not funny, but the coincidence we talked about Hillsborough. But I'm a Sheffield Wednesday supporter.
Yeah.
I was going around that time, and it was easy for me, to be going to a football match. I think I was 19 in 1989. It was easy. I go to a football match, and it will find that nobody racially abused me. But I actually do remember, and it was some Wolverhampton fans that were in front of us. And they were getting racially abused. They'd got into our end because they obviously were getting away end, and they were being racially abused, and it were just, they just ended up getting kicked out because they were in wrong end. But none of the racial abuse or anything like that were dealt with. So I understand. I know that at that time.
I as I say, growing up,
ourselves that it's gone, but it's not. I don't think it's not to the degree it was, but it's still not gone completely.
I mean, I remember the National Front, when I was growing up, and I remember the Anti-Nazi League and all these things that were going on, and awareness around myself. Not many members of the black or ethnic minorities were in the police force anyway.
No.
More started being recruited later on, I think. So it was it was an experience to grow up in that era. But I personally, up to that time, Jason, never had any issue with police brutality or police behaviors until my mother's death.
Yeah.
So as I say, when we came back from the inquest, my father said, like you say, with his experience and obviously the way he was treated at the crime scene, the way he was manhandled and what have you, he said, under no circumstances try and challenge this because we may get some retaliation. You've seen what they've done in the official forum. They've called your mother an alcoholic. They've basically destroyed the family. Yeah, and they've basically, they've destroyed the family in no uncertain terms. And the fact of the matter is, we need to retreat, start being a bit more focused on the future. And that was it for about 8-10 years. We kind of, I wrote to my local MP. I tried to write to people. I tried to get some support. I was doing it more or less behind my father's back, if I'll be honest, because begrudgingly I had to agree to what he said, because obviously in that culture, the eldest kind of dictates what happens in the family, that he's the head of the household kind of thing. So then in 2005, I relaunched a campaign after years of frustration and agonizing.
What prompted you at that time? What that particular?
Well, we were see. I used to. I'm a big fan of documentaries. I watch a lot of I like fact finding interviews and fact finding, shows on TV. And when you used to get the closing credits, Jason, of these documentaries, you'd get the name of the company or the people who've actually made that documentary. And I started making notes of these people. Then obviously internet opened up a big area, didn't it? So you start researching and you start looking at these people. Then you start dropping them emails and you try and get them to think about it. They never did, but I'm saying that was my way of getting into it. Then 2005, I wrote a letter to the Prime Minister, Tony Blair. At the same time, I wrote to the President of the European Parliament as well. And fair to them, they both replied, albeit through their aides. And from that point forward, I contacted the local MP, Ken Purchase, Labour, and I asked for an adjournment debate in the House of Parliament. Unfortunately, that never happened. So we want to get something recorded in the House of Parliament. Would have been a great feat for us. Then I started thinking about, where do I want to go from here? How do I want to go forward? Then luckily I contacted the local TV News Central reporter who did the original report on my mother back in the 89. He fortunately was still working for ITV Central, and he came and filmed me. He filmed me in my house, did an interview. Then we went to the crime scene. He filmed me there, interviewed me there as well. So that was done in the morning. So the idea was that to be edited and be broadcasted on the evening news on the same day. Then I get a call about 5 o'clock in the evening, and he rings me. He said, "Look, I can't broadcast." I said, "Why not?" He said, "Well, there may be issues about some of the things that are on there." And I think his legal team apparently looked at it, or something happened anyway. Anyway, the gist of it was that it wasn't going to happen. So that was the end of that. Then I called him back about a week later. I said, "Look, is there any chance we can do another one then?"
Which company? Sorry, which this interview you did? Which company was it with?
It was ITV, Central News.
Central. So Carlton then, which is
Carlton is a different area. We're Central. We're called Central, Birmingham area, West Midlands.
Right. Okay.
Carlton is like that. I think that's a bigger one, isn't it? We're like a small derivative, aren't we?
Carlton's covers Nottingham.
That's East Midlands. That's more East Midlands.
More East Midlands, yeah. Sorry,
this is more West Midlands. Yeah.
because Carlton were bought. They put David Cameron in there, didn't they, to get rid of?
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, you carry on. Sorry.
So basically, I rang him and I said, "Look, is there any way we can do something?" I was basically on my knees trying to beg him, if I'll be honest, because I wanted to kickstart the campaign in a more sort of in the public domain in a more bigger way. And he said, "I can't do that for you, but I can do something else for you," because he obviously knew I was upset about everything. I said, "What is it? Can you do for me?" And he basically said, "I can get you in touch with the police. I'll get them to listen to you again." Because originally what was going to happen was he was going to film me with the police as part of a mini documentary. That was the idea. So in the end, he said, "Well, I can get you to see the police." So he gave me a contact number. I called the police and they said, "Yeah, we're happy to speak to you and see you, blah, blah, blah." After a few conversations, then it sort of ended up as being a 3-hour presentation at Lloyd's House in Birmingham, where I went through the case, including the cirrhosis of the liver, including the proverbial dog remark, including the impact on the pedestrian crossing. So in essence, the presentation I did in December 2008 I thought was quite valid. I did a 3D animation depicting the crime scene, how my mother was hit on the pedestrian crossing. That cost a lot of money to do.
Right.
I had to actually measure the road with a tape measure, so I could get the exact measurements of the road, so we could get the real-time speed of the patrol car on the road, so we could then replicate the speed from 50 to 60 to 70 miles an hour, respectively, to show the different impacts. We also highlighted the actual bend in the road, which I referred to earlier, so we could show how you had to be very diligent at how you drove that car. Otherwise, you would inevitably cause a fatality, which was the case. So what happened then was that we did the 3-hour presentation. And at the end of the presentation, they basically said, all options are on the table. That included an investigation, a re-investigation or a fresh investigation by another police force other than the West Midlands Police Force. So we were like doing cartwheels going home, thinking we've finally got somewhere.
Yeah.
So that was in December 2008. Now, in November 2009, they got back to me. So this has taken nearly a year of toing and froing. So remember, they've put everything on the table. So we get called to the headquarters again in Birmingham, and there's 3 people present at this at this meeting. There's the 2 chief inspectors that we saw originally at the presentation. And there's this other police investigator who specializes in police collision investigations. And he's written a few peer-reviewed papers on the subject. So he's well known, shall we say, in that circle. And within about 5 minutes, all we heard was, as far as they're concerned, there's no case to answer. The 1989 investigation still has credence and it still stands. And basically, that's the end of it. So we walked out within 10 minutes. And I said, well, nothing's changed from 1989 to the present time. So bear in mind, this is now November 2009. So nothing changed in 10 years, in the 20 years. Nothing's changed.
No.
So in essence, what happened then was we walked out and not happy with that. I looked at the cirrhosis of the liver in great depth. I started doing research on the internet. And what happened was I got in contact with somebody in Glasgow, a professor of forensics at the Forensics Institute in Glasgow. And he was a very kind person. I spent a good hour with him on the phone. And he pointed me to some websites. He said, you want to look at these websites? He said, what you've got to understand is when a pathologist makes a decision, such as the cirrhosis of the liver attributable to alcohol abuse, they have to tell you how they've discounted other reasons for cirrhosis. And why have they come to just cirrhosis of the liver due to alcohol abuse? So he gave me a lot of pointers. And in the end, Jason, I did actually meet him in Glasgow. I went up and met him. Like I say, very nice chap. So I did a report to the chief constable in 2010. And the report was basically saying, these are my reasons why I don't think my mother had cirrhosis. So I put all the alternatives that could have led to cirrhosis. And the gist of my report was, it was a quite like a lengthy report because I had to do a lot of research and do a lot of referencing, because I can't just say I think this happened, or that I had to reference things as well. So the gist of my report was that my mother had TB in the 60s. And in those days, Jason, you had very toxic drugs that you had to take to combat the TB.
Okay.
And some of these drugs can affect your liver, and they can lay dormant in your liver, and they can lead to cirrhosis of the liver. So it's called drug-induced liver injury, DILI, drug-induced liver injury. That's the actual medical term for it. So in those days, some of these drugs were very, very strong in their toxicity. So they can do damage to your liver. Subsequently, they can cause cirrhosis. So I wrote this report, and that was my main conclusion and recommendation to the Chief Constable. So I sent it in week 1. In week 2, I got a letter back saying we're going to look at the report. We'll be in touch with you in due course. So 3 weeks later, they send a letter back to me, and basically this is the most horrific thing you can ever come across. They said to me, if you're saying your mother never drank alcohol, then we will concede that she never had cirrhosis of the liver attributable to alcohol. So they're conceding now. But here's the thing now. They're saying it's not cirrhosis of the liver due to alcohol. It could be something else. So what I said to them was, but this is wrong then, isn't it? Because the pathologist has made a major error, which is so integral to what the jurors thought of my mother. Because they was given a character reference in essence, wasn't they?
Yeah.
Of a vice or whatever, the behaviors she would have had. So the inquest hearings come and gone.
That's an integral part to the inquest. I mean, surely that's the way to get the inquest open again, because this is completely new evidence. All right, we'll concede it wasn't alcohol abuse. Okay, well, that was an integral part of the case, was that she was so out of her brain on drink, alcohol, that it impaired what she were, what her surroundings, how reacted to her surroundings. So that's the whole thing gone. It needs to be reopened.
Well, I said that to them. I said, look, this in itself is cause for reopening the case, or a fresh investigation, or be a retrospective one. Obviously, that fell on deaf ears. So that went down leg side as well. So the next thing that happened after that was we started doing a bit more organized and trying to be a bit more focused on what we need to do, because obviously the police were not going to entertain the idea of a fresh investigation. So in 2015, I went to 10 Downing Street and I handed over a major document for 3 people: David Cameron, who was the actual Prime Minister at the time, Theresa May, who was the Home Secretary, and Mike Penning, who was the Justice Minister and Policing Minister. And we got nothing out of that. So in 2015, we also did the first e-petition. And the idea of an e-petition is to go through Parliament, through the Petitions Committee. And the idea is to get 10,000 signatures in the first instance, so you can get a response from Parliament. But the ideal scenario should be 100,000 signatures, whereby you can get a debate in Parliament.
It has to be debated, doesn't it? If you get 100,000, doesn't it have to? Aren't they?
They have to have a debate in Parliament.
They won't turn up, but at least they have to have that debate.
Well, they usually have it in what they call the Westminster Hall, where they can have a debate there, depending on the circumstances, the severity of what it is. So we failed on that because we couldn't get 100,000 signatures. Then the next thing we did was basically we did another e-petition in 2018. Again, we failed. So I've done 2 e-petitions. So if anybody wants to say I'm not determined or not focused. I've devoted more than half my life to this, so I am focused, and I do want to. All I'm seeking is dignity and death for my mother, for her to rest in peace, for us to reach closure and start reliving our lives. It's been put on hold. Like it seems like a very long, very long.
It's a long period, isn't it? It's a very long, because it's all part of the grieving process. It's like you've had a grieving process that's lasted all this time. Yeah. You've never really been able to get over it, or not that you ever get over it, but come to terms with it. You've not.
Yeah, you have to come to terms with it. You like life is gonna, like it or lump it, life's gonna continue. You have to try and find a way of resisting, or try to find a way of a coping mechanism. But when you feel that there's been a miscarriage of justice, then it's very hard to do that. So the latest thing that we've done, Jason, is I did the complaints to the IOPC, which is the Independent Office for Police Complaints, which basically, again, I haven't heard anything for the last 2 years. So again,
police investigating police. Yeah, it's the same thing. They're all, like you say. I mean, these people are going to be retired officers, so the more likely to be of the time that your mum was killed and be more of a part of that culture. Yes. So we're on this like hamster wheel that we're never going to get off unless somebody gets some real justice at some point.
Well, I would say to sort of give that a bit more of an icing on the cake is these officers now, Jason, are receiving big, fat, juicy police pensions at the taxpayer's expense. I've always said you could always take on a few bent coppers. Well, when you're taking on the West Midlands Police Force, the Police Complaints Authority, Her Majesty's Coroner, the Home Office pathologist, there's an element of doubt then how far you can take it. But that's never deterred me, because I'm confident my mother was not that behaved in a way that she would aimlessly run in front of a police car which had its sirens blaring, flashing blue lights. Who would openly admit or do go in front of a car at that speed? You wouldn't do it, would you? You're just asking for trouble. She's crossed that road. She lived, since she's been in this country, her life's been around the Cannock Road. We used to live on the 88 Cannock Road. When I was born in 64, that's where we lived, in 88 Cannock Road. I went to school on the Cannock Road. There's a little infant school that used to be further along the road. All our life, and Powell Street, where we actually lived at that time, is a street off the Cannock Road. So she knew her surroundings. She knew everything. And like I said, they've killed her twice. And the second part is the defamation of character. She would never, ever do that. She had no...
Did that have an impact in the community? I mean, were there sort of whispers and people saying, things about perhaps that your mother would have been, about these revelations?
Well, I'll give you an example of that.
Strengthen people's resolve and say, oh, no, that wasn't, God, I can't remember her name. Tell me a name again.
I think the problem is when you put fear into people, not only putting fear into the family, you're putting fear into people. So it's the old adage: if it doesn't happen to me, I'm all right, but it could happen to you tomorrow. As a fellow human being, you expect to speak up. Now, I'll give you a good example of this, Jason. When we go to family gatherings, or when we used to go a lot to the family gatherings, I personally, and it's only me that does this, I have a tendency of bowing my head occasionally, because I think, what are people thinking about my mother, knowing that they've said in the inquest hearing she's an alcoholic, but she never was. There's going to be somebody who's going to think, oh, perhaps she was, and that's what hurts me, because You know,
and that's torn you away, because that alienates you from people that you're supposed to be
well,
happy.
yeah, and also it's also a way of saying, how can I get through to them that I'm not a pathologist? I'm not trained in pathology, but I can tell you my mother's not an alcoholic. You wouldn't have that conversation, because it's a meaningless conversation, because people will take what they want out of anything. They either take the negative or the positive. I'm on about the negative, and I do occasionally wonder what they think of my mum. What do they think was really what she was like? But the people who knew her will tell you without any hesitation what she was like. She was a popular member of the community. Like I said, she's been here a long time. She's one of the first generations of Indian women to come from the subcontinent, from the Punjab. So invariably, she had a good sort of mix of family and friends, from every diversity you can think of. There was no. She was like that. She was a very friendly person. And to degrade her in such a way, and to call her a dog, it just leaves a very nasty taste in the mouth.
No, I mean, that's just. Those first 24 hours, you've been manhandled by police, you've been grabbed by the throat, you've seen your mother's body laid there, you've had her shoe kicked at you, which you've managed to pick up.
Yeah.
Then you've been told that the investigation's over, and it was her own fault, and you've had to go, and those first 24 hours were absolutely horrific. And for him that copper to call her the proverbial dog, it's the icing on the cake for of things that are really bad about this.
And this in essence gives you an indication of the era that we're talking about. It's a reflection of policing. It's also a reflection of how bad it was in those days, But I'm of the opinion that a crime is a crime, regardless whether it's history. And in my report to the IOPC, I did mention Operation U-Tree, which was predominantly against Jimmy Savile from the BBC. So it was a three-pronged investigation. First one was about Jimmy Savile. The second part was Jimmy Savile and his associates. And the third part was other people other than Jimmy Savile and his associates. So it looked at historical, abuse of these victims, because the victims now have the strength to come out and speak, whereas in the past, they couldn't do that. And that's not that dissimilar to what we're at. We're speaking at, so 2005, I took the bull by the horns. And I said, I'm going to speak out. For a long time, I was just listening to my father. He said, look, they're going to do something to you. You are going to end up in peril here. Back off. And to some degree, I listened to him. And regrettably, I should have done it earlier. But like I said, I can't turn the clock back. But Operation U-Tree is an example of that. When victims come forward to tell their story, and they can name the perpetrators, because they got the confidence, because this is a different era.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's more transparency, there's more accountability, and most importantly, we say there's the more opportunity of getting justice as well. And I mentioned this in my report. I also mentioned the Serious Crime Squad, and I've already mentioned the Birmingham 6 and the Bridgewater 4. And there was other cases where they used to get statements under duress by threatening or torturing their victims. And there was also manufacturing or sort of doing statements.
I think it was the serious crime. What is it?
Crime Squad.
Crime Squad.
Yeah.
In Birmingham, I think it was down to them that PACE actually came into play.
Absolutely.
Became law, because they were just flouting every single thing that were, and leaning on people, getting false confessions, and doing all the stuff that we think these days is draconian. But we're having done to us, you know. But
well, you think about it, Jason. Mislaid evidence, fabricating evidence. You know, all these things were alleged to have happened in that era. Like I said to you before, it's not a light switch where you can just turn on and off and then start saying, yeah, you know, the culture's now changed because suddenly we've got a new chief constable who's speaking a different language or a different approach. It doesn't work like that. You still got coexisting officers who are corrupt, allegedly. Okay. I take my hat off to police officers who, on the public's behalf, fight crime and fight the criminal fraternity. They're putting their lives on the line for us. I applaud these people. And we need more of these people in the police force because they're doing a great job and protecting the public and the communities they serve. But alas, you've got people who are in the police force who are coexisting and doing these acts of criminality as well. And it's not surprising that we get miscarriages of justice. But I think, I'd like to think anyway, there's more transparency. Officers are more trained to seek these things out quicker. I mean, you look at the Stephen Lawrence, the murder of Stephen Lawrence and the things that happened there in the Macpherson report. And you had the, institutionalized racism that was attributable to the Met Police because the way they handled the, Lawrence investigation. So all these things have come ahead, and hopefully these are now ways of avoiding these kind of catastrophes that could potentially happen. But are these people going covertly, doing things in a different way? And they're doing it off the radar? I don't know.
I mean, it's not that long ago, is it, that we had an execution of what's his name? What was his name? In 2011, the one that caused the riots. Mark Duggan.
Mark Duggan? Yes, he was. They call that what they call that, Jason, is a hard stop, where he was in a taxi and he was driving along, and the police or the informants had told the police, or they had knowledge or intel, as they call it, that he was carrying a weapon, which was a gun. Okay, so somebody had given him a weapon. He was in a taxi and he was driving along to wherever he was going next. The police obviously ambushed him, and it turned out that the gun was thrown over the fence into a grassy area, which they retrieved later. There's rumors that it was planted there, but we can't verify that, allegedly. And also that he wasn't carrying any weapon, and he was shot in the back by a police officer.
Wow.
We don't know what the exact, only whoever was there at the time will tell you the truth. But that obviously, like you say, rightly, that led to the riots because the police never.
That's something else that's going to need the cooperation of the cover-up of the coroner and the person doing the post-mortem. It's going to need that sort of that those people to be involved in the cover-up for the cover-up to work. Yeah. So it's not beyond.
Look. I mean, look. If you look, not everybody can be wrong. Yeah. I mean, if I say to you, my mother's liver was switched at the post-mortem examination, either I need to be, taken away and put away somewhere because I'm talking rubbish, or there's something in that. And what I can say is my evidence is 24 years. I lived with my mother for 24 years, up until her death. She's never drank alcohol in her life. So who's telling the truth here? So this is what makes get you wound up about things, and what encourages you to be more robust about fighting for justice. And
did you try to get the inquest reopened? And if so, how did you go along with that? I mean, I'm assuming you hit a brick wall, but what was the process?
Well,
You
like
do.
I say, the original inquest hearing, my father said after that, look, you ain't going to win. And legal aid had run out. I'm going to be honest with you, Jason. We didn't have enough funds to fight it anyway.
Right, okay.
So we were more or less up against a very bad situation, really, if I'll be honest. And that also was factored into me stepping away a bit as well. Because, like I said, we didn't want any more misery and mayhem to enter the household because we had enough. Like I say, they've never apologized. They've never treated us with any dignity and respect, to be honest. We thought the IOPC complaints 2 years ago may initiate something, but they haven't got back to us yet. There's a lot of people out there who would say to you, why have you waited so long? Why have you done this so? The fact of the matter is circumstances dictate.
Those questions don't matter, though, do they? I mean, those questions. Someone who says, "Why is it taking you so long to do it?" I mean, it's like saying to somebody at the end of their life that, well, "Why didn't you do this?" You know, at least you are now doing something.
Yeah, yeah.
And you're trying to you're trying to get as much recognition for your mum's case and try to get some justice.
I mean. Yeah, and like I say, Jason, in the ideal world, we just want her to have dignity in death. She was not an alcoholic. You know, it makes my blood boil to think about it, let alone actually hear it from somebody.
Well, there's been a lot of good wishes for you anyway from the chat room.
Yeah.
Have you been watching the chat room?
I've been flicking my eyes across, and while I'm talking to you, I've been looking at some of that stuff. I'm also obviously part of the UFFC, which is an organization that fights brutality, state brutality, and people have died in detention centers, immigration detention centers, police cells, prison cells, or even out on the road or any other environment. For example, my mother was out on the road. So Mark Duggan is an example of that, as we've mentioned. So this organization is all about trying to fight justice. And it's we have a little march that goes on from Trafalgar Square to 10 Downing Street, where each member of the family, if they wish, can tell their justice story and tell the story of their loved ones outside 10 Downing Street. So we're trying to be focused and trying to be proactive. We support each other. There's a WhatsApp group we've got as well where we can, you know, it's like a soundboarding where we can air our views and things. I personally wanted to start a better structure in the UFFC, and I put something forward. It's United Families and Friends campaign.
Right. Okay.
It's been going for 21 years now.
Is this about people who've died at the hands of police?
Yes.
Or
in custody or on the road or in detention centres and the like.
Right,
so,
go on. Yeah, carry on.
And basically, like I say, I've been part of that for 2 years. I attended the conference 2 years ago. That was their 20th anniversary. And I got to know a few people to try and get a bit more, thoughts and possible solutions, because you share experience, best practice, and so forth, and you're helping each other through your experience. You know, it's a way of, some ways, it's a comfort as well, because you're immediately on other people's wavelength straight away. You're never going to be able to sit down and start explaining things because I'm already on your wavelength, because the misery, the trauma that they've been through is going to be commonplace for yourself. So you're already on that wavelength. So the idea is then progress it from that point forward. Whereas if you're talking to somebody solely who's not aware of it, then you have to do a lot of a backstory to it. And people are alarmed by saying, well, you know, 32 years, 31 years, what you've been doing, sitting, you know, around. I haven't. Unfortunately, it's a system. System is against you sometimes. But
inevitably, we've had the Jeremy Bamber Justice campaign on this show, Jeremy's been in prison for 30 odd years for killing his family down in Essex in the 1996, I think. Really, it's the bureaucracy. To get somebody in prison is easy. To get somebody out of prison or to get justice, you know, to get a wrong verdict is easy. To get it overturned is sometimes nigh on impossible.
Yeah, and I'm always of the opinion that if it's possible, Jason, if you could play the it's only a 3-minute video, the press TV. If you can get hold of that, there should be a link somewhere. They can get hold of that, and it shows you a bit of the my interview in February of this year, and it shows you what the officer said about my mother in terms of the proverbial dog comment, and it'll just give everybody a final sort of understanding of basically what I've been through. Really, it's been a very hard battle. It's been a very hard and arduous journey, which is still ongoing. But I've never ever conceded. I've never ever said to myself, I need to throw the towel in. I owe it to my mother, you know, at the end of the day, you know. Like I say, if you just to be accountable for what you've done and apologize and see what we can do from that point forward. But these people have gone beyond that. So we're not interested in that more. We just want justice now. We want justice.
Right, I've got it up. I'm just waiting for it to start so that then I can put it on.
Yeah, you'll have to scroll down to the video bit. And
I've got the video, justice for Kishni Mahay.
Yeah, that's right.
In death. Yeah, I've
there's a video on there. If you play, that's only 3 minutes, and that'll give everybody a kind of a consolidated overview of what we've been talking about, I think. And hopefully that will live in their memories for a bit. And
my laptop at the moment is so bad especially with videos and everything. It will start in a second, and I'll share the screen.
No problem.
For you. But while we're waiting for that, is there anything, anywhere anyone can find you online? Have you got a website, or have you got? I know you've got a Facebook page. Because I'm trying to starting the I'm going to relaunch the website. I'm going to do another version of it. I mean, on that original website, to be fair, I put so much stuff on there. I can't believe I had that much stuff myself. But I'm hoping to relaunch the website.
Second anniversary.
That's the one.
Okay, right. I'm just going to share my screen. I'm not very good at this. Share window. Is it a Chrome tab? Application window. That's the one. Share, and can you see that?
Yeah, it's coming up. So if you go to the screen and you can make it bigger.
Death of 64-year-old Kishni.
Yeah, click onto that. Yeah, that's it. You got it.
Patrol car on the 14th of March 1989 while walking on a pedestrian crossing in the English city of Wolverhampton. The police argued that the death was a tragic accident. The Mahay family is adamant that the investigation was insufficient, with blame ultimately placed on the victim herself. Police have opened an investigation this evening into an accident in which a 61-year-old woman was knocked over and killed by a police car answering an emergency call. No police officers were ever investigated or charged amid claims of a cover-up. 32 years later, and the family wants a new investigation and demand justice.
Try to get justice for her, and we've tried to bring out the facts so we can find closure and we can move forward with our lives. And hopefully, with that said, mother can have, rest in peace. And most important thing is have dignity in death, because we feel that's been denied because of a character assassination that was done.
Like many deaths in police custody, accusations of racism, including a slur by the officer in charge of the case aimed at the victim, Kishni Mahay, in a TV interview, would come to characterize the case.
You just cannot cope or anticipate for that moment when somebody, like the old proverbial dog, who runs out, darts out in front of you, in front of your car.
Superintendent Martin Burton referred to my mother as a dog. And this was less than 20...
Who sent me messages now? Someone sent me a message and it's support stopped it. Damn, hang on. Let me see if I can get it to play again. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah. Someone sent me a bleeding message on Facebook and it's stop. Now it won't let me play it again. Hang on. If it starts again, it should start again. Jesus Christ, this is crap. I need a Paul messaged you. Who is it who's messaged me? Paul Webster. Thank you very much, Paul. Good old Webby. Paul Webster, he's messaged me, and that's what's caused this. Let me see. I keep just trying to press pause.
Try that now. That should work. No, it's.
Oh God!
It was only 3 minutes. I thought it may make a bit of an impact. So unless you go out of it and go back in again, might refresh the page.
There we go.
Oh, there you go.
And to add this tag about being a dog, it just decimates our memories.
Raj Mahay himself says he was also racially abused at the scene of his mother's death.
When I first arrived to the scene, I basically collapsed on my knees. A police officer came towards my direction and grabbed me by the throat and erected me, put me upright. I explained to him I was the son of the deceased. I said, "That's my mother." I don't think he registered with him. Then next thing I know, I was being called on numerous occasions, and I was told to get into a patrol car, told to go in the door.
In addition to questions on police conduct, key witnesses who stated that the police sirens were not audible and that Kishni Mahay was on the pedestrian crossing when hit by the police car never had their day in court, despite being interviewed on TV at the time. Like so many cases of deaths in custody, the call for justice remains as loud as ever, with so many families campaigning for many years to simply have their voices heard. 32 years since the death of a beloved wife, mother and friend, the Mahay family hopes that a new investigation may finally bring about closure and give them the very justice they have waited so long to receive. Richard Sudan, Press TV, London.
So that's it. That gives you a good sort of overview of where we are in the modern day, where we, like I say, we're still fighting for it. We'll never ever stop fighting. Whatever happens, good, bad or indifferent. It's taken 31 years of my life. And I think we're at the stage now where we need to have some sort of a definitive closure. It just gets you every day. You think about it before you go to bed, and you wake up thinking about it. You don't get much respite from it because it was so callous. It was so unnecessary. Look, we all have to die at some way, some stage. But the way they did this, it was like she was suicidal and she was an alcoholic. And this is the worst thing about it, Jason, is that as far as they were concerned, she's an expendable. She's of no consequence to them. She's not even a flea in their ear.
No.
But that is our mother. That was a wife of somebody. That was a grandmother of somebody, and a sister,
a friend.
Everything.
Auntie, a niece. A grandmother by the sound of it.
Yeah. She was a grandmother as well. Like I say, 2.5-year-old daughter of mine that she used to. But I can only say to people, whoever's in this position, hopefully you won't be, but never give up. Okay, sometimes life's, the way it is, it can be against you, but there will be a time when something will fall into place. And when it does, you will remember all the sad times you had. And, and you'll say it's all been worth it. The aggravation, the trauma, the sadness will all be worth it in the end, because somebody has got dignity then. Then they can rest in peace.
Yes, mate. Well, Raj, listen, you've had a big impact on me personally, on the call with you previously and tonight, and I think you've had a big impact on our listeners as well. So a big thank you for asking to come on, bringing us to you, or bringing you to my attention, so that we could do this. I'm so glad that we can, and I'm sure that you'll, if anybody else wants to get you on on their show, then they can.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I was going to say to you, Jason, is apart from obviously being really, really happy to be on your show. As I said, I was listening to the Mark Devlin show, which directed me towards you. And we spoke off air about other people. If anybody's out there who wants to hear my story, I'm more than happy to share that, because ultimately what I'm after is for publicity as well. Sometimes if you can be a thorn in people's sides, i.e. the police, they would have to do something. They would have to react to it. And that's all I'm looking for is from, like I say, I can't do any more than put a complaint into the ILPC as to where I was treated at the crime scene, and the following day when I went to ID my mother's body, and obviously the proverbial dog remark and the post-mortem examination. And all I want to say to people is, look, please get interested, think about it, and sometimes interest alone can force people's hands to do the right thing, and hopefully the police will do the right thing, because I think deep down, police has changed to some degree. I'm not saying it's utopia, because there's no such thing, but it's changed. There's more accountability because there's more bodies in place to do audit trails and be gatekeepers and the like, so there is all that elements of things out there. So who knows?
It certainly is, Raj. Listen, it's been I say great. I mean, I really, really wish that there were no need for us to be sat here talking like this.
Definitely.
All these years later, but you've got so much respect from the chat room.
Yeah, I'd really like to thank everybody
who said. Sorry.
I'd like to thank everybody for the comments. It's really uplifting that people have responded in the way that they have.
I just want to make just the point. There was one that this Keith guy, and he said, "Oh, this is old news. It's 1989. There's more pressing things to talk about now." That's utter fucking bollocks, because this is still going on, and this will affect you. It can affect you at any point in in time. And when we started Raconteurs News, me and Andy back in the day, I always said I wanted to try to get to the stories and get the people on who weren't getting any exposure at all anywhere else. And I think I got away from that a little bit, but I'm certainly going to be going back that way in future. And a great start tonight, a good 2 hours. It's
and I appreciate the time. Like I say, you give me a good platform here, and I just hope people appreciate my story. And I'm happy to do any other thing that will give me that publicity. And what I will say to people is that if you're ever in this position, it doesn't matter how long it is, how long it's in history, it's happened. A crime's a crime at the end of the day. The trauma is a trauma at the end of the day. Nothing's going to change that. And most important thing is, you're not going to bring anybody back. But what you can do is celebrate their life. But you can't celebrate their life if it's been distorted in such a way that.
Of course, you want to celebrate the dignity of that person's life.
Absolutely.
So brilliant. Listen, Raj, I'm going to have to end because I'm absolutely.
Thank you.
In that first hour, you talk about pressing on and pressing on. In that first hour, I didn't feel well at all, and I got a bug here, that I was going to vomit in because I was just feeling really bad. But I managed to not vomit, so I just felt really bad in that first hour.
So God bless. I mean, like I say, I'm listening to you, Jason. I'm also trying to read the comments as well, and just say thank you for all the people who've supported me. It's very uplifting to share something with somebody, and hopefully something good will come out of it. And I'll say to you, Jason, on air as well before we finish, first of all, thank you, and second of all, if you've got any other ways of me exposing this story a bit more on other platforms, please let me know. You got my details.
I've got your details. Hey, listen, if anybody wants to get Raj on the show, there's no on this show. It's not all about egos or anything. If you just get in touch with me, I'll give you Raj's details, and I'm sure it's now we've got you Google Chrome downloaded.
Yeah, I'm ready to run rock and roll, as I say.
But you were telling
I mean, in terms of a modern day story, we know COVID-19 is. I've been working through all this because I'm basically a key worker. So I was on the train coming home. I work in Coventry. I was coming home, and the train got delayed. We usually catch the Manchester train, and I read your text, and I said, "Well, hopefully I'll make it home in time." And so I'm glad everything, as much as I could have hoped for, it's gone better than I thought it would. So our timing has been right. You gave me 2 hours of good time, and like I say, everything's set up and everything seems to have worked. And I like to thank the viewers and the people who are listening to this and watching this. And like I say, everybody's going to give you their opinion, and luckily it's been favourable for most of the time, and I thank you for that.
Brilliant. Right. Well, thank you very much to Raj Mahay, my guest this evening. Thanks to everybody who's been in the chat room. Yeah, Alice, I'd echo Alice. If you could give us a thumbs up, it always helps. Or give us a thumbs down if you don't like it. It's easy for me. We're on Facebook and YouTube on a Monday and Tuesday night usually. I know it's Wednesday night tonight. We should be back next week. You have been watching Raconteurs News in colour, and we'll see you soon. Take it easy. Bye-bye.